Sam he's like the 14-year-old kid that stole the family car. He doesn't have a driver's license. He got 8 of his high school friends in the car, and then he found out that there's like $100,000 of cash, a bunch of drugs, and a gun in the car. And then they went joyriding for Saturday night.
Wow.
And the entire thing ends, horrifically with the car wrapped around a tree, half the people high, but that student in high school. But the point is, he was not ready to drive the car. If he had 30 years of experience, if he was surrounded by 200 good attorneys and accountants and banking credit managers, then they would know what they don't know, and maybe they could have constructed a company that might have managed this amount of risk. I'm saying that he basically incompetently, foolishly, greedily, enthusiastically pursued what he thought was a good idea, but he didn't have the combination of the real world experience and the ethics and the legal understanding and the banking understanding to even know what he didn't know. So is it criminal? Absolutely, it's criminal. It's like if you roll over a bunch of people in a car and kill them all, it's illegal, right? But at the end of the day, it's not clear to me that Sam understands what he did wrong now. For example, what did he do wrong? There's accounting fraud here. There's basically equity fraud by creating an air token. There's all sorts of credit fraud. There's investor fraud, misrepresenting the equity you sold the investors. There's self-dealing. He issued himself loans. There's front running. There's insider trading. There's wash trading. There's such a litany of ethical and legal lapses. But if you look at all the coverage in the crypto world, they miss the fundamental issue, which is it's illegal and unethical to issue your own air token. I mean, that the entire premise of the industry, an exchange that trades unregistered securities and an issuer of unregistered securities, that fundamentally is unethical everywhere in the world, illegal nearly everywhere in the world.
I have two questions.
And yet they built the business on that premise. On top of that premise, then he inflated the accounting values, built backdoors into the exchange.
It's just nonsense.
Yes.
He had created an extremely fragile situation where he had one account, Alameda, that had a $10 billion plus margin position backed by air. And if that air token, if FTT or Serum, if they had been attacked by anybody, the entire thing goes up like a house of cards. So I think if you look at all the blow-ups, right, Celsius, BlockFi, Do Kwon, Luna, Terra, Three Arrows, Genesis, and FTX, all of them were going to blow up at some point because, like Luna, Terra, it was $20 billion worth of a stable coin backed by $2 billion of real assets, and a $50 billion Luna thing that had $50 million a day of real liquidity. So they were all running on 100x rehypothecated leverage, and they were going to blow up. It's just a question of when they're going to blow up. I think that this is it's a painful deleveraging of the entire industry, but if you look at everybody that was kind of behaving badly, like doing stupid things, like again, aggressive lending in the real world is 1.4 leverage. That's insanely aggressive lending. These guys were all running at 20x, 10x.
That's insane
leverage.
To me.
So you had a lot of people behaving badly. They were destined to blow up. It might have been held off for a bit, but I have seen pretty credible evidence circulating in the Twitter sphere that Alameda had already taken a $3 to $4 billion loss in 2021 during the bull market because they were just doing stupid things. Running a private, unregulated set of companies, right? He had his private holding company, Paperbird. He had Alameda, a private company. He had FTX, a private company. No transparency, no disclosure. If you were running a public company, you got to actually publish audited financials every quarter and make 8K statements. you have adult supervision. I have lawyers, I have 2 sets of lawyers, 2 sets of accountants, an army of internal accountants, external accountants, etc. And if I just came on your show and said, hey, I just wanted to announce that MicroStrategy has 175,000 Bitcoin, my phone would start ringing.
By the lawyer.
By the time I put that down, they'd be like, what are you doing? You're crazy.
Yeah.
And they would say it not just because it's wrong. They would say it because their careers are on the line and they don't want to spend 10 years in litigation hell. So there's a way that you run a public company and there's a way you run a regulated company. And on the other hand, Sam was his own regulator. He could make up his own rules. He was accountable to no one. And if you have $10 billion in the bank and then you lose $4 billion and you don't, and the bank doesn't have to disclose what it's done with the money, you just go and give yourself a $4 billion loan secretly. He didn't tell anybody. So they were able, in essence, because they had so much power as private, unregulated. It's not just unregulated. It's one thing to be unregulated. It's unregulated and opaque. If you look at and poorly run, right? There are some offshore businesses, Tether, Binance, that are not regulated and they're not onshore in the U.S. They're not public, but by common wisdom, they generally are viewed as better run, like adult supervision, because when people ask them to redeem $15 billion, they can do it, right? I think that FTX, Three Arrows, these companies that went bankrupt, Do Kwon and Luna Terra, they were just really poorly run, opaque crypto organizations, and it was destined. Now, what was the pen? I think, look, there was a simmering war going on between the Bitcoin movement and the crypto movement in DC, and the Bitcoin movement is, Satoshi gave us ethical money. Nobody controls it. You have to pay for it by burning energy or by buying it with real cash. And you can't corrupt it. You can't issue more. It's capped at 21 million. Nobody gets to, co-opt it or use it in a usurious fashion to make themselves rich. Okay, that's Bitcoin. The crypto world is, we invented Solana to be better than Bitcoin, and we invented such and such FTT to be cleaner than Bitcoin, and don't mind the fact that we gave 80% of it to ourselves, right? And that we're going to dump the rest on the general public, and we're opaque about it. Now that war is going on Capitol Hill, where the crypto lobby is lobbying for light or no regulation. Let us basically issue these tokens and make them commodities, and so we don't have any securities laws constraining us. The regulators that understand better, like a guy like the chair of the SEC, would say, look, they're all securities. You can't just let them trade as commodities. That's the same as saying anybody can issue their own equity and lie, cheat, and steal the general public, and that would threaten the entire $100 trillion securities market. But Sam was the number 2 donor to the Democratic Party. He found out that the chief operating officer that worked for him was the number 3 donor to the Republican Party, and that guy gave $25 million to the Republicans in the last few weeks. So he wanted to be viewed as, remember he said he was going to give $1 billion in the next election cycle?
Yep. Yeah.
He might have given $1 billion in the last election cycle. We don't know. But he wanted to be viewed as the great progressive savior and financier. So they gave hundreds of millions of dollars to celebrities. They gave hundreds of millions of dollars to academic institutions, hundreds of millions of dollars to politicians, huge amounts of money to journalists. Right? Why wouldn't you? Keep in mind, if I can generate $10 billion in air token, in order to make $1 billion a year, all I got to do is take $10 million, lever it up 5 to 1, lean on the liquidity on my own exchange, and the price moves $3 or $4. I get $2 billion more. I made $2 billion in the year in investment income, and then I go and I borrow $1 or $2 or $3 or $4 billion in my margin account. Right? They were counterfeiting money, and then they were using the counterfeit money to steal other money, or either to steal it from their deposit or steal it from their investors or steal it from creditors. Then they were funneling that into the political and the marketing process. And That's why you saw them on the Super Bowl ad. That's why the FTX arena was named after them. That's why every celebrity is getting sued right now, right? If you can, what business is better than counterfeiting money as a business?
Right.
Okay, so what burst the bubble here? Well, this can't go on forever. And in D.C., there's a war over whether or not the SEC should regulate crypto or whether the CFTC should regulate crypto. So Sam supports a bill, the Stabenow-Boozman bill, and they give huge amounts of money to politicians. And if you read the bill said crypto will be regulated by the CFTC. It would regulate if you were trading soybeans or pork bellies or
commodities,
oil or
anything commodities. Got it.
Okay, a commodity is an asset without an issuer. Okay, a commodity is a much more ethical thing to promote and to trade than a security. A security is yo-yo coin or penny stock. I invented it. The difference between a security and a commodity is if I looked at you right now and said, you know, I don't like people in Japan, I'm just going to turn off all their steel. I can't do that, right? I can't make steel not work in Japan. I can't turn off electricity in Japan or turn off oranges, right? So a commodity is an asset without an issuer. No matter how much money you have of pork bellies or lumber, you cannot invalidate somebody else's lumber, okay? And that's why it's impossible to commit securities fraud.